£1,000,000 Miracle. English Summary Story. When I was 27, I worked in an office in San Francisco. I did my work well and had a promising future. I felt happy even though I was alone in the world. On Saturdays, I didn't work. Instead, I sailed my small sailboat on San Francisco Bay. Once, I sailed too far out because of the strong afternoon wind. It pushed my sailboat from the bay into the Pacific Ocean. I lost hope until a small British ship, a brig, spotted me that night. They rescued me and were sailing to London. The voyage was long and stormy. To pay for my trip, I worked as a sailor. When I reached London, my clothes were old and dirty, and I only had $1 in my pocket. With that dollar, I ate and slept for the first 24 hours. The next 24 hours, I didn't eat or sleep. Around 10 o'clock the following morning, I went to Portland Place. There, I saw a child walking by, holding a big pear. The child ate a small piece and threw the pear onto the street. I was very hungry and wanted that pear, but whenever I tried to get it, someone passed by and looked at me. I tried again and again, feeling desperate. Finally, I decided not to care about the people watching and went for the pear. At that moment, a gentleman from a nearby window invited me in. A well-dressed servant opened the door and took me to a beautiful room where two old gentlemen were having breakfast and discussing something important. I was very hungry and stared at their breakfast. What I didn't know was that these gentlemen had made a bet several days before, a bet I had no idea about at the time. Let me tell you what happened next. There were two old brothers who had an unusual bet. They argued about something strange for days until they decided to settle it with a bet, as the English often do. Here's what the bet was about. The Bank of England released two banknotes, each worth £1,000,000, for a transaction. England used one, and the other remained in the bank. Brother A said to Brother B that if an honest and smart stranger arrived in London without friends or money except for the £1,000,000 banknote, he would starve or get imprisoned if he tried to use it. Brother B disagreed, saying the stranger could survive for 30 days without going to jail. Brother A went to the bank, bought the £1,000,000 banknote, and then prepared a letter. The two brothers sat by the window, waiting for the right man for the bet. They saw many honest faces but not smart enough, or smart faces but not honest. Some were honest, smart, and poor, but not strangers. When they saw me from the window, they thought I was the right man. They asked me questions and realized I might be the one. They handed me an envelope but told me not to open it until I was in my hotel room. I felt hurt that they joked about me. When I left, I couldn't find the pear on the street. It was gone. I felt angry with those gentlemen. Far from their place, I opened the envelope and found money inside. I rushed to the nearest eatery and ate a lot. Then, I took out the envelope to pay and found a banknote worth $5,000,000, not one. I was speechless and stunned. The eatery owner and I were shocked. I tried to pay for the meal with the banknote, but the owner couldn't change it. He thought I was a rich person playing a joke by dressing poorly. He said I could pay whenever and eat there as much as I wanted, thinking I was rich. When I left the eatery, I rushed to the house of the two gentlemen, eager to correct their mistake. But to my dismay, the servant informed me that they were gone on a journey to the continent and wouldn't return for a month. I felt frustrated and nervous. It was crucial to talk to them. The servant couldn't help, mentioning that the family was away in Egypt and India. I insisted that the mistake was enormous and needed fixing. However, the servant assured me they'd return on time and bid me goodbye. Confused and in a fog, I remembered the letter they had given me. It said I was an honest, intelligent, poor stranger and that the money inside the envelope was mine for 30 days. If they won their bet, I could have any job with any salary. The letter had no signature, address, or date, which felt strange. I couldn't comprehend their game, but I made a decision. I realized they were betting on me, although I didn't know the details. If I returned the banknote to the Bank of England, I'd face endless questions. Telling the truth wouldn't be believed, and lying would lead to prison. No honest person would accept it. So, I concluded I must keep the banknote for a month to help the old man win the bet and secure the promised job. The idea of a significant job and a good salary made me happy. With this plan in mind, I wandered the streets of London, thinking of my next move. I often passed by a shop that sold clothes and wished I could buy some new outfits, but I didn't have any money. I had a banknote worth a lot, but no one would accept it. After passing by the shop several times, I finally decided to go inside. I asked if they had any old suits that nobody wanted. The person I talked to nodded, showing they understood. Then, another person looked at me and also nodded. They led me to a room with old and unattractive suits that nobody wanted. I really wanted a suit, so I didn't complain. But when it was time to pay, I asked if I could pay later because I didn't have small money with me. They seemed surprised and thought I would have a lot of money. I asked if they could change the big banknote I had. They agreed, but then their smiles disappeared when they saw the banknote. The shop owner scolded the person who sold me the suit because they couldn't tell I was actually rich. Then, they gave me a fine shirt and a nice suit and promised to make more clothes for me. But I couldn't order more until they changed my banknote or let me pay later. Despite their confusion about the banknote, they offered to send clothes to my address, but I didn't have a permanent address at that time. I managed to get everything I wanted without using any money. I tried to get change for my banknote, but no one could do it. I bought whatever I needed and even things I wanted just for fun. I stayed at a fancy hotel in Hanover Square and usually had my dinners there. But breakfast at Harris's simple eating place was my favorite. It was where everything began, the moment my story spread all over London because of that banknote. Harris's place became famous just because I had breakfast there with my £1,000,000 note. I lived like a rich and important person, spending money freely. But I knew it was like a dream that would end once the two men returned to London. My story made it to the newspapers, and people couldn't stop talking about the strange millionaire with the big banknote. There was even a funny drawing of me on the front page of a magazine. People followed me on the streets, and it was amusing to wear my old clothes sometimes. Shop owners thought I was poor until I showed them my banknote, and their reactions were priceless. After being in London for about 10 days, I visited the American ambassador, who was pleased to meet me. He invited me to a dinner party that evening and said he knew my father from Yale University. He even invited me to visit his home whenever I wanted. I was happy to have a new important friend because I thought I might need one when the story of the £1,000,000 note and the bet came out. I had a plan. If I won the bet for the old gentleman, I would pay back all the shop owners who let me buy things on credit. With an important job and a big salary, I intended to clear all those debts in my first year. The dinner party had 14 guests, including some important people like the Duke and Duchess of Shoreditch, their daughter Lady and Grace Eleanor de Bowen, the Earl and Countess of Newgate, 6 Count Cheapside, Lord and Lady Blatherskite, the ambassador and his family, and some others. There was also a lovely 22-year-old English girl named Porsha Langham. I fell in love with Porsha within minutes, and it seemed she felt the same about me. But then, another guest arrived, Mr. Lloyd Hastings. He recognized me from San Francisco, where I used to work in an office for Blake Hopkins. We spent a lot of time together working on papers for a mining company, but now, he was surprised to see me as a millionaire and a celebrity in London. Lloyd remembered how we had tried to sell shares of a gold mine in London, but it didn't work out. He shared that he'd lost all his money and felt sad about it. He asked if we could talk later, and I agreed to listen to his story. At dinner, there was a bit of a problem about where people should sit, so we didn't have a proper dinner. Instead, we had sardines and a strawberry. After that, we played a game called cribbage, but it seemed more like people were playing to win something. During the game, I confessed my love for Miss Langham, and she said she loved me too. It was a wonderful time, and we laughed and talked a lot. I explained to her that I was actually poor and didn't own the £1,000,000 note. She found my story funny, and I shared that I needed an important job to pay off my debts. I asked if she could come with me when I met the two gentlemen. She agreed, and I felt confident that with her by my side, I could ask for any job and salary, and they wouldn't refuse me. When the dinner party ended, I returned to the hotel with Hastings. He talked about his troubles, but my mind was solely on Porsha the whole time. When we reached the hotel, Hastings admired its grandeur, saying it was a palace, and he thought I was rich. Little did he know, I was penniless and in debt. Winning the bet was my only chance. Hastings expressed his desperation, saying a tiny portion of my income could save him. He didn't know the truth about my financial situation. I needed to win the bet to help us both. He was upset that I seemed unwell or distracted, not having listened to his story earlier. Suddenly, he got up, laughed, shook my hand, and said he was glad for me, thinking about my happiness because of Porsha. He then recounted his story, summing it up. He was sent by the owners of the Gould and Curry gold mine to sell shares for $1,000,000. Any amount above that he could keep, but with just a month to sell, no one was interested. He had a plan. He wanted me to lend him $1,000,000 to buy all the shares, and I could become the new owner. I paused for a moment, contemplating. Instead, I proposed another idea. Knowing the mine's value, I suggested using my name to guarantee the gold mine. People trusted me in London, so if he sold the shares using my name, we could share the profits when he sold them for $3,000,000. Lloyd was ecstatic at the idea, dancing around and assuring me that using my name would draw wealthy Londoners to buy the shares. He was overjoyed, and we made a pact to share the earnings equally. The plan was set. I assured Lloyd he would sell the shares using my name, and within a couple of weeks, he would secure the deal. With this agreement, Lloyd was relieved, thanking me wholeheartedly. It was time to head back to Portland Place, where everything had begun. The next day, news about the California gold mine shares spread across London. I spent time with Porsha every evening at the American ambassador's house, talking about our love and future without mentioning the shares. As the month ended, many rich Londoners bought the shares. I had $1,000,000 in the London and County Bank, and Lloyd had his share too. It was time to meet the two old gentlemen. Dressed in my best clothes, I went to get Porsha. Before meeting the gentlemen, we discussed the job and salary. I introduced Porsha, and the gentlemen were surprised to see her. I handed over the £1,000,000 note, winning the bet. The gentlemen were astonished. I also showed them a certificate of deposit for £200,000, earned using the banknote. Porsha was surprised and upset that I hadn't been truthful about the money. But when the gentleman offered me any job and salary, I declined. Instead, Porsha, being playful, asked for the job of being my wife. The gentlemen laughed and were amazed. It turned out, Porsha's father was one of the gentlemen. We were married, and the canceled banknote became a cherished gift in our new home.